So, yeah, just
Sure.
Sure.
There's a clip share here in the middle of the table.
I will share. You can just share, join the meeting and just share your presentation. This, yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, July 16th. This is the meeting of the City of Toronto Design Review Panel for that date. Before we get started, I will hand the meeting over to Christina for the landing on.
We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by treaty with the Mississaugas, Credit, and is within the territory of the district.
Thank you. So welcome everyone and thank you for participating. Important to draw your attention to the fact that in addition to being recorded, today's session is also being live streamed on YouTube. We have one agenda item today. It's the Tamil Community Center. I again thank you for participating. This is a city lands official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, as well as the first review of the Tamil Community Center at 311 Staines Road. We have 1 hour and 40 minutes scheduled for the review. It is a formal review session and there will be a vote taken at the end. Staff have 10 minutes for their presentation. This will be followed by a 20-minute presentation from the consultant. Discussion by the panel will follow these presentations. As I've already mentioned, the session is being live streamed on YouTube and is also being recorded. The recording will be available on the City Planning YouTube channel following the meeting. Before we get started, I'm going to do a roll call. Members, please indicate that you are here, participating in the review, and whether you state that whether you have a conflict of interest with the project. Start with Michael Leckman.
Present, no conflict.
Juhi O.
Present, no conflict.
Olivia Kuhn.
Here,
Jessica Hutchin.
present, no conflict.
Ralph Giannone.
Present.
Jim Goff.
Present, no conflict.
Jim Melvin.
Present, no conflict.
Joe Lalco.
No conflict.
And you're present. Perfect. Sabella. Nala.
Present, no conflict.
Thanks so much. Some reminders before we get started. For panel members, don't forget the staff questions and to provide commentary on both issues of concern and appreciation. To the presenters, I will do a 1-minute verbal and I'll also wave now signal to in advance of you that 1-minute mark before your time's up. And if I could also ask you to introduce yourself before you make the presentation as well. So let's please begin with the staff presentation.
I just need to sign in so that I can share my screen, and it's taking a second.
Sure.
Okay. Let me see the screen.
Not yet.
We could share this.
I should share it with you.
Staff presentation.
Yes.
Should be a do.
Well, there's a different,
No.
It's
okay, I have two, that's one. Okay, go.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosanna Punnett. I am the city planner on the file with my colleague here, Swatika Anandan, who will do another portion of the presentation. So for today, we do have a site plan application in for the Tamil Community Center at currently temporarily addressed as 311 Staines Road. A little context. This is the City of Toronto lands. It is being land leased to the TCC, also known as the Tamil Community Center. Currently, the city is reviewing an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. Future site plan application is going to be submitted. The subject site back in October 2020, the land lease, that was when it began. The city entered into a land lease for this new facility to be constructed by the Tamil Community Center, which is a not-for-profit organization. In addition to that, we are working through the ZBA and OPA at the moment. The proposed Tamil Community Center is open for all communities, all members of the public. The phase one will consist of a ground floor with a dance studio, gymnasium, kitchen, meeting room, lockers, change room, management offices, multi-purpose room, a courtyard, and a reception area. Level 2 of phase 1 will have a library, kids areas, and a walking track. Phase 2 will be a future auditorium. Parking for phase 1 will comprise of 58 parking spaces, inclusive of 7 accessible spaces. Overall, the site is to have 114 parking spaces. With that said, the application is still under review, and we'll be looking more details with respect to this. A total of 40 parking spaces will be provided on site. The frontage on Staines Road is approximately 120 meters. The official plan urban structure, this is located within the urban area. We are working with Rouge Park for potential trail connections to the Rouge that is located to the east. Within the official plan land use map, the site is designated neighborhoods. The following uses are allowed within this designation: low-rise residential, schools, community center, library, day nursery, senior and nursing home, long-term care facility, public transit facility, public services facilities provided by a local, provincial, and federal government. With this, the site is further defined by the Morningside Heights secondary. The subject lands are within Area D and Area A Valley. These areas are subject to specific policies. With this, the official plan amendment that is currently going to be under review will further define and delineate the area with the appropriate studies and documentations for staff to review. Within this area, there is a Morningside Heights design guidelines, and they provide the following principles in brief. They reinforce community identity with design, connectivity, enhancement to natural features, attractive community edges, views and vistas to natural features, as well as some extensive tree planting. The current zoning for the site, it does have multiple zone areas, the RD and OPAN. With the zoning amendment application that's in right now, we further define this area along with the OPA. Currently in the RD zones, residential detached, it permits residential detached dwellings, parks, libraries, day nurseries, and community centers. We will be looking into this further and to ensure that the site is up to date with respect to the right zoning permissions. I'm Swatika Anandan, I'm the urban designer on this file.
take over Rosanna and go over the aerial view of the existing context of where the site is located. Rosanna and myself are quite familiar with the site as we live nearby and experienced the natural beauty that surrounds it. And we wanted to begin by, like at least show you a quick overview that shares that sense of place with you. The site is uniquely positioned in close proximity to one of Scarborough's most serene pockets, the Rouge National Urban Park. In the larger context that you see here on the aerial view shows the Steeles Avenue to the north, the Morningside Avenue that runs southwest, aligned by industrial condos, and Old Finch Avenue to the south. The picture of the water body that you see is that of a pond on Staines Road. And here's a fun fact, there are about 126 species that have been spotted, around 70 just this year from a local bird watcher website. And next slide, please. Let's take a closer look at the site itself. It spans about 3-4 acres of vacant land, and the landscape is quite flat and open and as a tree buffer along the Rouge River corridor. To the north, you also see the Hydro Corridor, which is part of the Gatineau Hydro Corridor, and locally it connects many of Scarborough's neighborhoods, acts as a linear greenway. And immediately to the south and to the west are the single-family detached dwellings, very typical of Northeast Scarborough, with brick facades and driveways and backyards and established tree lines. These neighborhoods are really well established and no immediate high-rise or commercial structures are anywhere in the vicinity. Transit is pretty good here. The bus service along Staines provides frequent daytime servicing, connecting the residential neighborhoods to Finch Station as well as to the Scarborough Town Center. With bus stops in close proximity to the site, it makes it highly transit accessible for the future community center. Along Old Finch, there is also a multi-use path with bicycle entrance. It supports walking, cycling, and strollers. So there is a possibility to take that out to this connection. Within walking distance, there are local elementary schools and smaller markets, although there is no major recreational or cultural facilities that are immediately present. They're at the intersection of Finch and Morningside. That's the bottommost picture that you see is a retail strip mall with eateries and a gas station. While schools and retail services do serve families and working adults, there's a noticeable absence of senior-focused activities in this area. Scarborough's senior population is growing rapidly, and especially among common immigrants, many of whom face a lot of barriers due to language, mobility, and lack of transportation. Many of them live in multi-generational homes and are dependent on the younger population for recreation as well as for engagement. We believe that the Public Community Center will fill a crucial gap by its presence, and I will let John speak to the proposal.
Thank you. I'm wondering if Nedra is on the call. She's a representative from the Town Community Center.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the consultant presentation and then come back. Okay.
So I'm introducing Nedra Rodrigo, who is a member of the Tamil Community Center Board.
Yeah. It would be good to have the issues of focus first before we go into, so will you show those before?
I can bring those back.
Yeah, thanks.
So we have two issues for the members. One is the Public Community Center is adjacent to the Rouge Park. Are there any opportunities to look at incorporating natural elements as part of the design? That was one of our questions. The other one is that the proposed build form aims to reflect Tamil cultural identity in a meaningful yet contemporary way. Do you have any recommendations for how design elements within the public realm might further support this objective, as it's quite nestled away?
Okay, thank you so much. So now we'll flip over to the consultant.
Okay, and so Nedra Rodrigo is a member of the Tamil Community Center Board. She's been involved in the project since the outset, and she's going to speak to the social and cultural aspects underpinning the project. And Nedra, if I can ask you to be as succinct as possible because we're a little bit behind time.
Thank you. in order for me to provide some context for the TCC, let me give you some context on the community itself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so though Tamil folks have been migrating to Canada since as early as the 1950s, the largest number have arrived here as refugees from the 1980s on. The Tamil community sought three priorities or foundational values in mobilizing this community center. And the first is to hold on to our culture as displaced people. And this is a culture that is both very ancient, dating as far back as 300 BC, and very modern, finding expression in fusion, in cultural fusion, and in contemporary media, social media, and so on. So our aim then was to honor the past, but also to be very conscious of the present and the future. Our second aim was in keeping with our motto, Aramseya Virumbu, which is to support our community members who face challenges. Aramseya Virumbu means to desire to do good. And that is, a driving force behind this community center. The third value is Yadu Mure Yavaram Kurlir, which means that all villages are my village and all people are my people. So the third founding principle for the construction of the TCC then is the ways in which we can support other communities, racialized or marginalized communities who have experienced similar challenges as the Tamil community, but also how we give back to Canada, which has given us shelter. We can move to the next slide. Right. We wanted to ensure that the Tamil Community Center was placed in an area that has the highest density of Tamil population. And where we aim to situate it, it would serve between 500 to 900 households in Scarborough, around 500 in the Durham area, close to about 1,900 individuals in South Markham. The Scarborough Rouge River is, of course, the most populated and diverse ward in Toronto. If we think about why this community center is needed, as Rosanna pointed out, it's going into what is currently a socioeconomic dry zone. Residents in Northeast Scarborough and Southeast Markham, and we've seen this especially through the pandemic, faced many challenges accessing vital public services that have led to social exclusion and the poor quality of life. So through our studies, we were able to identify that a large number live in rooming facilities, which means that it's also harder for us to, for the city to gather data on health outcomes and so on. So we wanted to ensure that this project was community-driven and data-driven. And so we conducted two public consultation phases. The first was with individuals to determine what services should be provided in the Tamil Community Center. And as you will see, a large number wanted to prioritize culture and the arts, performances, and so on. But also another significant numbers identified streamlining social services and support for women, for seniors, for LGBTQ plus members, and so on. The second set of public consultations we conducted were with organizations to determine the frequency and the type of use of the space. So in October 2020, Toronto City Council voted unanimously to support leasing us 311 Staines Road as the future site for the Tamil Community Center. Whoops, we're going rather fast through these slides. We can backtrack just a little bit. Thank you. And this site fits in perfectly within that socioeconomic dry zone, but at the same time, this densely populated area. In addition, I also wanted to point out that this project has received support from all levels of government. In addition to this land lease that the City Council voted unanimously on, we have also received funding support through ISIP from both federal and provincial governments, amounting to 26.3 million.
Nedra?
Yes, Dave?
Hi, my name's Meg. I'm the chair of the meeting. I just, it's so, just to let you know, we've all reviewed the package before.
Okay.
So we're well on board with it. I just want to make sure we have enough time to, our purview is to review the design more than, like, we think it's wonderful, that the project's wonderful. So our only purview is to review the design. So I want to make sure we have enough time for that at the end, because it's a large package. There's 100 pages.
Okay. Did you want me to speak about Indigenous consultations, or are we good there?
Nedra, I think I'll take it over from here, and if you could stay on standby to answer any questions that relate to your interest in the project or your background in the project, that would be great.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. So my name is John McKenna. I'm an associate principal at GH3. Apologies for the overrun. I hope you can give us a few extra minutes so we can get through the design. I'm joined today by Pat Hansen, who is principal at GH3. Jeffrey Ma, who is with Renee. Renee are our design partners on this project. GH3 are prime consultant, but we are very much a design partnership. And Emma West and Sarah Gregory from Bassfields, who've been invaluable supporters to us as we work through the municipal framework for the project. Excuse me if I run through this very quickly.
Just, yeah, 15 minutes.
Oh, no, I can get through it 15 minutes. Okay. I also want to say thank you very much for inviting us to present this project. We really believe that this is a significant opportunity to bring much needed social, cultural, and recreational services to, as has been explained, an underserved part of our city. And, you know, a really important question for us in this project has been, how do we make sure that this project is actually uniquely Tamil without being exclusive? It must remain inclusive to all communities, particularly marginalized and racialized communities who may face the same lack of access to services and space that the Tamil community has. And so we did a lot of research. We looked first of all at Tamil language. Tamil language is the oldest classical language in the world, meaning it has a strong literary tradition of over 2,000 years and is still spoken by millions of people today. It's really remarkable, and it's also just objectively, visually, a really arresting script. And so we're working to incorporate Tamil language into the project in a very meaningful way. For example, when you enter into the building, there is an immersive donor atrium that includes the names of all the families who've helped financially to make this project happen. Dance and music are really core to Tamil identity. We had the privilege of attending an Arangatram, which is a community coming of age dance performance. This project has a large auditorium seating about 450 people, and it will be used predominantly for Tamil community performances. And it's designed as such to really focus on dance as the main type of performance that will be in this auditorium. We've been really compelled by Tamil fabrics, silk saris, the intricate border of those fabrics and the pleating, which has begun to inform an idea about how we can break down the mass of some of the large volumes that we're dealing with in this building type. And the kolam is a really fascinating floor art that just kind of, I think, really represents the geometric and mathematical precision that is really kind of inherent in many aspects of Tamil culture. We're steering clear of religious and temple architecture as a reference, amazing structures in their own right, but this is a secular project. And so therefore we're more drawn to this rupestral architecture, strong carving of stone. These are structures that you find in Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka that provide refuge, sometimes at the side of journey routes. And we're kind of struck by the very strong, solid void carving that these structures evoke and the shelter that they give to people. And they're beginning to inform our idea about form making, facade making, and creating shelter. We continue to adhere to 5 design principles that were developed through a pre-design study that predated our involvement in the project. They are the central courtyard, the vessel, the inner and outer, the landscape, and the language. And some of these are decorative, some of them are really embedded into the spirit of the project, but we hope that they help to inform your understanding of the project as it exists today. I'm going to skip through this. I think everybody knows where the site is at this point. We're in Northeast Scarborough, between Staines Road and the Rouge. And, you know, we are blessed with this direct proximity to the Rouge Park. It also brings with it an added responsibility for natural heritage conservation on the site. We are also neighbor to single-family detached residential neighborhoods to the west, the north, and the south. A really interesting condition at the north is the hydro corridor. Depending which way you look at it, can be seen as something not attractive to us. It is a really great opportunity for the project. It means that we have space and long views in perpetuity, which in a densifying city like ours is not something to be taken for granted. We are also neighbor to a really rich network of existing green spaces that are really close to the site and above the site on some sides. And when you bring the understanding of the Rouge back into the site, we're really kind of a bridging piece between a lot of really valuable pre-existing communities that we have the benefit of engaging with. But how do you put a building on this site has been a question for us, but we don't have a lot of the kind of formal urban design cues to build on as we might have in a more densely developed site. Early thinking and discussion with the city was to do something conventional around creating a kind of traditional street edge by aligning the length of the building to Staines Road. Our instinct is not to do that. We feel like we want to rotate the building east-west because we think it's really important to preserve these long views across the site that the neighbors to our west have enjoyed, and also that we think kind of bring the experience of the Rouge close to the city as you traverse this part of Staines Road. If we increase the kind of real estate that we have at the east side of the building and then begin to cut into it and form it to kind of maximize that aspect of the project, still respecting a kind of shorter elevation along Staines Road, we think we can maximize the benefit of the east side of the site and respect the condition on the west side of the site. So the building kind of navigates these two very different conditions. It also allows us to kind of form the building in a way that intuitively can be phased. We had to recalibrate the program with budget realities when we took the project over in 2022. And it looks at the moment like we will have to phase the auditorium and one of the dance studios to a later date. One of the other benefits of this approach is that we can kind of intuitively locate different program types into each wing, and then the culmination of those 3 major program types, so the dance and music, the literary, commemorative and exhibition, and the sports and recreation, all galvanize in the central courtyard, which is the space that welcomes everyone into the building. We're trying to limit hardscape on the site, so we do that to the west, and then allow the east portion of the site as much as possible to be softscape and naturalized. We also are going to maintain an existing kind of depression at the level of the site relative to Staines Road to allow a building which has some quite tall volumes in it to feel as nestled as possible. We want to respect the datum of the tree canopy of the Rouge, but also the ridge height of the houses as much as possible so that this building feels comfortable navigating those conditions. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to find an appropriate level of interpretation of Tamil references. We think the shade and refuge of these structures is interesting as a way to start creating architecture that has deep overhangs to reduce solar heat gain in some of these large spaces that kind of want to be glazed. There's an interesting heritage link between Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, where there is this rich history of using brick, as we have here in Toronto. We also think that the carving of some of the stone elements is a way into us to start to break down the massiveness of some of the large surfaces that these building types typically have. We're using brick as the predominant cladding material on the project. A glimpse of how these different moves kind of come together to create an architecture that we think is specific but also functional. And so you're all probably familiar with the site plan at this point through the diagramming. We want to make sure that the more conventional space of the program, the gymnasium, is to the west, to Staines Road, that it really activates that part of the site, that people passing by can see that and activity in the building, and that space also opens out to other landscaped areas to the south and north that can be programmed during summer months for fairs, playgrounds, and things like that. The ground floor of the gymnasium opens up completely through glazing and is kind of a beacon to draw people in. The main pedestrian access route also passes by the length of that space, so people coming to the building for the first time really get a sense of the life of the building within. We have other site amenities such as a recreation sports field. It's just a mown patch of grass, really. It doesn't kind of any great amount of infrastructure to the east. Again, kind of respecting the character of the Rouge. A sculpture courtyard nestled between the two wings of the north, and then a kind of planted garden that comes into that cleft in between the two wings of the east to draw the greenness and the character of the Rouge as deep into the plan as possible. An image here of how the drop-off plaza might be shut down in the summer at times for community events and fairs as a generously proportioned plaza that can be programmed by the community as they see fit. Parking is always a challenge, and we really wanted to avoid having a sea of it between the street and the building. So our strategy is to take advantage of that level difference that we have and to nestle a band of parking along the south of the site that sits about 2 meters lower than the grade of the houses directly to the south. We think it's as discrete a position for the parking as we can get on the site. And then we do have additional overflow parking at the north, which would be used predominantly for events in the auditorium. We also have a clear servicing strategy. We had initially requested 2 curb cuts from the city. This wasn't feasible, so a clear split of service and delivery and garbage vehicles from public vehicles once you enter the main entrance of the site. The pedestrian access into the project is important. We want to encourage as many people to arrive using public transit as possible. This kind of axial, formal pedestrian access is sheltered and covered by a deep overhang of the gymnasium walking track as you enter from Staines Road, bringing you to the main entrance. Equally from the south parking lot, there's an axial connection, and both of these culminate at this main entrance vestibule, which is at this kind of cleft between 2 wings, visible from Staines Road, visible from the parking lot, so that people have an intuitive idea of how to get into the building. We also want to cross the site with as many walking tracks, biking trails as possible. This drawing shows our current thinking on that. We're working with TRCA to see if we can have an on-page trail through the Rouge setback, which is a 30-meter setback from the long-term stable top of slope at the edge of the Rouge Valley. And we really want to connect into those existing trails as possible so that this site feels as porous as possible within the wider neighborhood. This is a view from the southeast showing one of those pedestrian access ways kind of snaking its way through the landscape, bringing you into different parts of the building. The dragging or kind of extension of the Rouge across the site is our main landscape move. We really want to plant the site with as many trees, particularly around the perimeter, to using native species to make sure that we're drawing the character of the Rouge as close as possible to Staines Road. This diagram showing the concept of that in time, this site will feel very nestled into place and that the building will feel part of the landscape that has predated us. And this has also been given approval by the various Indigenous groups that have been for a long time engaged in this project, who support the idea of planting as many trees as possible on the site. There will also be spaces within the landscape for commemorative Indigenous artwork that will be developed in tandem with some Tamil artists. This site plan is interesting as it's somewhat outdated, but the sports field was previously partially within the 30-meter setback zone. We've had very clear feedback from the city and the TRCA that this is not acceptable, and so the most recent site plans that have been the basis of the previous diagrams shift the sports field and reduce its size. It's not a regulation size any longer, but the client is more than willing to make that sacrifice to make sure that we engage positively with the conservation authorities. A view of the building as we imagine it would be engaged or seen by people as they leave their driveways in the morning across Staines Road. In the fullness of time, there'll be more trees around us, but we just wanted to show it kind of a year or two after full construction. In terms of sustainability, we have a limited budget on this project. It's been challenging, but we're doing our very best to target net zero carbon and LEED Silver certification, predominantly through kind of judicious position and sizes of openings, deep overhangs, and a very high performing envelope. We're going to push for as much rooftop PV as possible. But I think the thing that we think is really important is the resilience. Like the refuge structures in Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, this building should be a refuge for the community, for people who may not have air conditioning or HVAC that can deal with the smoke that we are witnessing these days. And so we're pushing hard for increased performance and redundancy in the systems that will make this building and keep it a safe space for the community to come to if they need to throughout the year. I'm going to be done in a minute.
No.
I'm going to finish by talking about the courtyard because it is the center of the project. The other three program areas kind of move around it and form it. It is the space that people enter into. It has an indoor and an outdoor component. It's a loose contemporary interpretation of a courtyard proper, but it's the heart of the building. And it's also engaging with the Rouge strongly as we create this kind of gap in the plan to pull that into the building. It's important for us that it's a dynamic contemporary space, but that you always get glimpses of the landscape around, views up and view down, and views through and across and between wings of the building. We think should be a really dynamic experience. And that we really try and bring through large glazing on the east of this part of the building, the Rouge, the experience of the Rouge deep into the plan. I don't need to go through this in too much detail, but this is how the plan is organized around the courtyard and then each block. The auditorium is a really important space. It'll be used weekly for Tamil performances. It currently has about 425 seats. The gymnasium is also, we think, a really important dual-use space. It has uninterrupted view of the surrounding neighborhood on the ground floor, the deep overhangs to keep it cool and protected from the hot summer weather, and then a perimeter walking track on the second level that we think could make it useful as an impromptu performance space before the phase 2 auditorium comes in. And then finally, a really important part of this project is the library exhibition reading room space, quieter contemplative space with strong views out to the east to the Rouge, a balcony facing the Rouge for events. And then finally, what we hope the building will feel like in place in the winter months, which we know are kind of a longer portion of the year every year. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to move into questions from the panel, questions of clarification. And if you, we're going to be virtual and real hands. So I'm looking first to Jim and Sabella to know if they have any questions they'd like to ask. Seeing none. See Michael. Okay, so we'll do Michael, Olivia, Jessica, Rob, then Judy, and then Jim, and then Sabella. You'll have something at the end. So Michael, let's start with you.
Question clarification for the city. To the north is the Hydro Greenway, really important metropolitan scale infrastructure in the city. Does it have any recommendations, guidelines, anything at all about its edges and integration with it from adjacent properties such as this?
I'm not aware for this site. I want to live in close proximity to that. The only permissions that have been given so far is for an urban farm in that corridor. And there is, I would say 15 to 20 meters before any kind of residential or construction activity has been covered.
Pathways through, are there any controls on extending paths or other activities on that space?
Right now, the gradations and the topography do not allow for that. And if you could switch to one of the slides which shows the ponds in the hydro corridor, that limits the activity of such linear greenways, especially closer to the community center and across on both sides of Staines Road. Whereas there are stretches such as the Meadowway closer to Morningside or more closer to McCollin, there you have more of an organized multi-use trail path, which has been formulated, but not in this.
So this is more like wilderness.
This is more like this.
Okay, thank you.
Let's just actually go around the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Given that the building is about 2.5 meters below street level, I'm curious how wheelchair users are going to get from the street to the building. I didn't see a ramp in the drawing.
There is, where we have the main pedestrian steps coming down, there is a dog-leg ramp that starts at the top of the stairs and discharges you at the same point as the bottom of the stairs.
Okay.
It goes parallel to Staines and then turns on itself to bring you back down. I should clarify that at that point of the site, the grade level difference is about 1.5 meters between street level and where the main kind of floor level building.
Okay, great. One more. I'm kind of curious about why you need the overflow parking. The street, Staines Road, is currently totally empty from every photo I've seen online. So I'm curious, why can't you just use the street?
We really don't want people to park on the street. It's very important. And in fact, there is a future road widening theoretically proposed for Staines Road. It's really important to us and actually really important to the Tamil Community Centre Board that we can accommodate all parking demand on the site. And so understanding that at times there may be an increased demand for performances in the auditorium, we think it's important to have this additional parking overflow space.
Okay. And one more. There seems to be a really large drop-off area to the south of the building. I'm not totally clear why that's needed. Is there a function to that space other than pick up drop-off?
It's required to accommodate the Wheel-Trans turning radius.
Okay.
And we see it as, we're calibrating the scale of it, and it was one of the early feedback comments we got from the city on our ZBA application, OPA ZBA application. We would like to maybe incorporate an island of planting if possible. And we think it's an important space that can be, it's a useful space that can be programmed for community events as a large space with adjacency to the gymnasium and the entrance.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
My question is about the plaza. You sort of answered it, but I guess just can you talk a little bit more about orchestrating events versus drop off? It seems like there's a lot of events. We want to move it.
Yeah.
So really didn't hear the last part of your question.
I just said it seems like when there's a large event, that's when we really want to use a drop off. So how are those two things?
I think our thinking at the moment is that in that instance, the south parking lot would become the drop-off area. We may need to increase a turning area at the end. I think in that case, Wheel-Trans wouldn't be able to come directly into the site. They may have to drop people at the pedestrian entrance from the street. Of course, if there were people who had mobility issues that needed to be brought, there would be some management in place to make sure that that could happen safely, even when there was a large event. In that case, where we're not using the plaza itself for vehicular use, we do have that very clear pedestrian pathway that comes down to the parking lot at the south, which is not too long. And there are going to be trees planted on the east side of that to make sure that it's sheltered and shaded. So I would say it's not a fully baked aspect of the design just yet, but hopefully in the feedback we get from the city and from yourselves, we'll begin to kind of put some detail on it.
That's good. Thank you. Chosen to show some interesting materials for the paved areas and the renderings. And I was just wondering, often they're quite dark. Can you explain if there was any significance to those or what the design intention was behind them, if any?
Yeah, it's a good question. We will be having a concrete floor in the interior of the building, and we're looking at having kind of a dyed red concrete. We would like the exterior hardscape areas that above the building to feel like an extension of that floor, so that there's continuity of inner and outer spaces. So right now we're looking at colored precast pavers. We're actually looking at some dyed asphalt materials. It's early days, but I think to us there is an effort to unify the ground surfaces inside and outside the building. We're also looking at colored rubber surfaces in the playground directly to the north of the gymnasium, which would feel like an extension of the gymnasium floor as well. So.
And then, sorry, I just had one other quick one. The seating areas along the streetscape, are they on the upper level or the lower level? There's sort of two.
They're on the upper level so that they're directly accessible from the municipal pavement boulevard. And they would have, they we think are good sites for public art, so that people who might not make their way fully into the site can kind of engage with the spirit of what's happening on site.
Rob?
Explain the strategy of fixing the playground where it is.
Yeah. We want that to be as close to the street as possible because we know it's going to be a very in-demand space from our community consultation. So we think that it can be accessed directly from the street without going into the building. Equally, the Tamil community, through engagement, have confirmed that they play a lot of basketball tournaments. And when there's basketball tournaments happening in the gymnasium, they wanted outdoor kind of informal gathering space. So that playground kind of does double duty for us. It's accessible directly from the gymnasium, but it's also visible for the people, for people who are passing by, who can kind of make their way into it without going through the building proper.
Thank you. In your conversations and consideration, was there any discussion about the flood in this access site?
It came up that we're not required to do floodplain assessment. Like the level of the river is so low relative to the bottom of the river valley is so low relative to our site, and there's natural overland fall to the Rouge from our site. We'll be maintaining that within the 30-meter setback. So currently there is nobody flagging a significant flood risk.
Jim? No questions. Jim?
Yep. You mentioned that you had a number, I think 2 community meetings to determine program. The program is well thought out for the building. What was the community requests or needs for the exterior program around the building, in terms of like playgrounds or like I don't see anything like that in the plan.
It was asked, the first most popular response was a soccer field. So that's why we have that large kind of multi-use sports field incorporated. A playground was also very highly requested. And also spaces for gardening. And sorry, that isn't appearing in any of the drawings, but our plan for the footprint of the phase 2 is to locate a community garden there. I think the reality is that that will exist for quite some time before we develop for phase 2, but at that point, maybe we would relocate the community garden to another point on the site.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'll get Sabella first and I'll come back to you. Sabella?
Sorry, I wanted to ask whether cricket came up at all in the public engagement.
Not that I'm aware of, but I can check through the consultation results. Not that I'm aware of.
And can you just quickly describe the that grade change you said at the main entrance where the steps are? It's only 1.5 meters, but on the section drawing, it's showing a 2.5 meter drop. Is that 2.5 meters further north or is it further south?
Yeah, unfortunately, I apologize. I think that's an error in the drawing. I think that is the maximum level difference that we have right at the south of the site where we have the parking lot. As you move north, the grade of the site and the street kind of resolve to become closer to each other. So where we have the entrance, it's about 1.2 meters.
Okay, and my last question is in terms of bicycle parking, is that being addressed at the edge of the parking lots, or do you have a goal in mind for bicycle parking?
Yes,
count?
we do. We're locating 40 bike spots. Currently, they're located, I don't know if you remember the axial pathway that went from the south parking lot to the main entrance. They're located along the east side of that as a row, so that when people come in from the main plaza, the bike parking is right there and adjacent to the main entrance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the proponent. Are you aware of any principles or specific components that that would be part of the lease agreement with the city to do with open space parkland. I was thinking about comparing this development with other public parks or community parks. And the programs are usually much more intense than this one. But are you aware that there are either requests in process that haven't been addressed by the design, or that they're just not there? There is no requirement from this leasehold agreement.
Unless we've missed them, and I'm going to double, triple check, if there are none that I'm aware of. But it's a good question, something that I'll certainly look at in detail, and if there's something that's been missed, we will ask you to address it. But as far as I know, no.
Thank you.
Hello?
Jim, Melvin, we can hear you.
Yep.
You might be able to mute him. Thanks, Maria.
There we go. Okay, super. Any other questions for them? Because we have a few minutes left in the question period. No? Okay. So I'll do a brief summary and then we'll move into panel discussion. Thank you so much, both of you, for your presentations. The summary, this is an OPA and zoning bylaw amendment with SBA to follow. It is the project involves a land lease on city lands to the Tamil Community Center. The Tamil Community Center will be building their building. It is within the Morningside Heights secondary plan and on the edge of the Rouge National Urban Park. And it's to the south of the hydro corridor in the area, and it's within a low-rise residential area. The mandate, as expressed by the consultants, to make an inclusive and secular center that serves both the Tamil and the greater community. The project construction will in all likelihood be phased. The proposed building orientation and landscape approach are intended to bring the Rouge into the site and allow wide views into the park, the Rouge Park, from Staines and the neighborhood. The proponent is working with the TRCA to connect it to the existing walking trails and bring them across the site. The building has a courtyard at its center and is aiming for LEED Silver and net zero. Very short summary of the project. Some of the highlights. So we will now, with that, move into panel discussion. And I think what we'll do is just do what we did before. We'll start with Michael and then move around the table and then go to Jim and Isabella on Monta. So Michael, could you lead us off?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry, Michael. We have 40 minutes for that, so let me just do some quick math. So you each get about 4 minutes each. Okay, thank you.
Time wrong. Looking at page 37 and looking at the Prestrel, the rock cutout architecture as referenced there on the right side of the page, I'm quite appreciative of that reference for this project and its development and how it subtly engages with a cultural dialogue with the Tamil culture and history. Really appreciate that. I find the planning elegant, the materiality sophisticated, and with this page 37 reference and the brick architecture and the front entrance atrium intention, that there's good cultural resonance here. The running track is an inventive way to make that rock cutout architecture be integrated within the scheme, and I find the performance space simple and effective. I want to talk about what I didn't fully appreciate in the early reading is that this is an island of culture, essentially a wilderness with some houses to the south and to the west. So as an island, it's surrounded by nature. In fact, it doesn't need to enhance the nature that's there. It's one of the most spectacular natural reserves in the country with the National Rouge Park. So really, it's a transition from wilderness to culture is the kind of nature of the site. And so I'm not suggesting I know what the right strategy is for that, except that's being someone who spends a lot of time in the wilderness. A little bit of breeze is a very important thing in order to be able to enjoy this wilderness through the spring and early summer season. And too much enclosure actually is a bad thing, because you won't be able to use the space and everyone will race inside. On your drawing on page 43, and others to do with the site, I think it would be beneficial to, if you believe in my interpretation, to actually represent the river to the west, the greenway to the north. Those are all elements that are creating this incredibly important surrounding for this transition to a cultural experience. I would speculate that that south exposure with the intended dark paving with the reflective surface, maybe on its own, it might be something that could actually be, on a day like today, quite stifling. Perhaps because of representing this adjacent wilderness, it'll be less so. And so it might help support an argument for this open plaza framed by rock-cut architecture immersed in wilderness. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentations. First, with respect to the parking supply, I understand that you're trying to really avoid alienating the local community, but the street space on Staines looks totally unused to me. So I think, frankly, that's kind of a waste to be building a lot of parking on site in what could be green space. The more parking you have, the more runoff you're going to have, the more heat effect you're going to have. So I would really encourage you and the city to try to work together to see how parking on site can be minimized. With respect to the pickup drop-off area, again, there are the same issues of heat island and runoff. So I would encourage the proponent to try to minimize the size of that, and trees to shade that area, I think would also make it more useful for outdoor events, providing some more comfort and coolness for the participants, as well as reducing the overall heat impact. The trail connections to the park, I think, are a great inclusion in terms of expanding the function of the center. As Michael said, it's kind of that transition space. So I know you mentioned it's early days in the landscape planning, but I hope that as you move forward, the ideas you mentioned, including incorporating Tamil and Indigenous design elements, could make it a really interesting experience, you know, kind of a destination really for the broader community. And I noticed there's really very little or no shade provided around the building. So I think the landscape plan should really focus a bit more on taking into account the comfort of the site users. Like when I come out of that building on the south side in summer, well, I want a cool place to stand. I don't want to be in the boiling sun. You know, I've had enough of that in Toronto. Thank you. So I think that's pretty much it overall. You know, I would say it's a good initial concept, and it's great to see a place being created for the Tamil community, but some enhancements to really kind of integrate the building more with its surroundings and make it a more comfortable experience for pedestrians around the site could really make it a really excellent project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It's a beautiful design. I really appreciate all of the aspects of materiality, all of the sort of research and understanding of the culture and the goals of the project to really get that conclusion. I think it's such an important project, and appreciate you bringing it forward today. I think the outdoor programming to me is really key to the success of this project. And one thing that I would like to know more in terms of culture is sort of the intangible cultural heritage of this place. So how do people gather? What are the rituals? What kinds of activities do you see happening here? And you know, the city staff are asking how can culture be reflected in an inclusive way? And I think the activities are sort of key to
determining how the outdoor spaces can get designed and what are the opportunities. I live in Regent Park and the soccer field there is used for sports, it's used for prayer, it's used for political rallies. So when I see a sports field, I see so much opportunity there. Second comment about sustainability. So of course I really commend the aspirations that you have. I really appreciate the interpretation of architecture, of culture, and the use of passive strategies in order to achieve that. I feel like there's a little bit of a tension between all the different things that you're trying to achieve. So zero carbon, the sort of amount of parking, which Jim alluded to, and then I love this idea that fingers of nature coming into the building. However, for me, some of the outdoor spaces, for example, the ones to the north, it's sort of facing the parking, it's facing the loading. The one to the east, it sort of narrows into a little bit of a word form. I wonder if those spaces can be refined, perhaps consolidated. I don't want to say, you know, it should be a block. However, simpler form will give you better energy performance. So I think just looking at how all of those things are saying or conflicting with each other will help to simplify it. Jessica.
Thank you very much for your presentation. All the background information is all very thorough and interesting, and I think everyone's commented kind of already on how interesting this parcel of land is in terms of its adjacencies. And I really got excited by that idea of the room sort of creeping up into this area that was once farmland and sort of maybe turning into a more natural state, while also providing for a new wonderful use. I also really appreciate how the project makes numerous connections into the surrounding community, and I think that sort of integrated as it sort of previously was just a piece of land on the edge of the beam. In terms of the pickup and drop off area, doubling as a plaza space doesn't feel quite right. It seems sort of like very hard and void of sausage. And then in combination with adjacent parking kind of creates this rather large area of hard. Understanding that, of course, when it's an event, things are happening and you need space. I wonder if part of the parking lot could not be used for an event. It also seems a bit tenuous to have vehicles entering and coming down a slope right into where a plaza would be during an event and then essentially turn into park. So maybe rethinking how those kind of functions happen and maybe the wheel trans could be part of parking. I just think it could use a bit of a additional thought as you identified. I was really excited to hear about redesign and principles. I feel like it's really wonderful to incorporate that idea of sort of language and landscape into the public realm, perhaps in the next stage of design. I wasn't seeing those principles necessarily expressed in the landscape itself. And I'd love to have seen more information on the call environment and how those 10 traditions of geometry and patterning, could impact paving, what those spaces would be, and perhaps there's a way to integrate that into wayfinding around the site and to bring some of that culture outside the building. With regards to sustainability, it would have been great to see some diagrams of where water flows and how it's collected. There are a lot of patches of hardscape, so it would be interesting to understand how water is collected and how that maybe starts to influence the types of vegetation that would be deployed on the site. And then just sort of regarding the overall open space, I think the landscape plan on 85, which might have been the old one, but it shows a lot of sod and sod coming right up to the building. And I'm wondering, I can't help but think about, still out space after a performance in the auditorium or, taking a book outside or just having that still out space next to the building to really increase that inside-outside relationship that was discussed. And just exploring how those programmatic spaces can expand in the warmer months. And then also, I just thinking about the history of Tamil poetry and looking at that as in relation to how often poetry would look at the expression of the nature in relation to the human experience and seeing if there's something there in terms of the landscape and how you're essentially creating the valley and trying to make it more productive, more more helping sort of invading the site of it. So I think there's something there. And then my final comment would be, if this is phased and phase two, what happens there when the phase one is done? Do you partner up with World Wildlife Fund or TRCA or somebody and create an urban forest that talks about plants or a children's garden and just looking at that. But thank you very much, very excited.
Great. I just want to reiterate what everyone has said about the presentation. I think it's an elegant and sophisticated package, really enthralled with the layers of ideas that are forming the design, and so excited about this project. It's an incredibly important project. I imagine there's an Italian cultural building that is, I can say private, but is open to the public. It's become really quite successful bridging cultures, which really I think the intent here is that I really hear this initiative. I'm kind of struggling a little bit about the party. I think the party is a really great party. This idea of these kind of forms opening up towards the marine. I know that the theater is a second phase. It's really hard to understand it architecturally. It has a lot of work to be done in it, where I really believe, again, Michael mentioned the Preston imagery is so strong around the gym and the cultural wing, you can say. And I think that it kind of worries me a little bit how solid it is. Though I think the spill out areas or section areas are key, I think, to the connectivity of that form to the landscape. I kind of wish they were flipped. The gym was actually where the theater was. The theater was up the street, just because I think the gym has this incredibly beautiful, elegant connectivity to the exterior, to look out towards the field and towards the gully. And then you get the wedge built. But again, I also love where it is presently. I questioned the playground because actually it's given the limited, say, programmatic elements in the budget, that I think the playground is in the wrong spot. I think it would be great to have it adjacent to multi-purpose room where I think a lot of people are going to be all day long, especially, I guess, parents who are bringing their young children. I think the playground kind of seems they have to go outside around the building or through the gym, which may be locked or having events or whatever. And I just feel that the playground has a great opportunity to be either an outdoor court space and just allow that additional outdoor physical activity space to inhabit that, which could allow that to bridge with the community as well. We've got teenage kids to get to half court. Or it's actually just a beautiful planted tree lost. Allow the landscape to come into that space, hiding additional parking, which is vital, but yet, clearly they'll appreciate its challenges. But I do think that the playground should be maybe at the south side, getting as much south light as possible. We did years ago, we did a community center in Chester Lee community. Public meetings had 7 interpreters. It was one of the most amazing experiences, professional experiences with engagement. The questions that were coming from the various communities that were feeling ownership of that facility was incredibly profoundly moving. So I wonder, there's 2, I'm going to say communities, young and old. I just want to make sure that there's enough space for young people and enough space for the elderly to really enjoy and be comfortable within it. And that was a lot of the conversations that we had. It was also, I'm going to say, workstations that were allowed to bridge the community can come and use. People that have 4 computers that are coming in and actually be able to just sit down and work. So I think that there's parts of the program that small but mighty, that could find themselves and maybe enrich this kind of big, broad gesture of spaces that are within this facility. Otherwise, I really excited. One architectural thing, those vertical slits on the gym. I think they, it's kind of odd because there's this kind of carving idea, this base that's being carved out, and then there are these kind of slits that are seem to be just halfway over those kind of angled panels. And I think maybe they could actually be right into that crux and maybe be much more kind of carved out as opposed to. I understand the need for light, but maybe there's another way of doing it. I just love the form, so love to just reinforce it. So.
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of sustainability, actually, I don't know what everybody has talked about. I love the twist on it, and I love the thought that one behind it. That's why I thought it's really cool that you're able to try to achieve a more really big aspect. Well, kind of unrelated, but then I'm also torn at the same time. Can you really achieve that so carbon goal and set out to? There's so many energy laws that might be created. From years again, what is becomes a priority as we move forward the execution of the design? So the building itself again, like was very well thought out. I'm trying to really solve it, and I think you're in the process of solving it, and it's really underscored by the pursuit of different goals. I typically talk a lot about carbon energy, but I think really interesting with this project is really the water that concerns me. And I was actually involved in a quality study in the area. So the Rouge Park, the watershed is having very serious issues. Right now, the current flooding plan has not been updated. In some of your study, actually sandwiched between two flood plains. So on the east side of last words that you said, there's a bit of step back. I think there's a lot of buffer that will site. But on the west, every single residential housing on the west actually are within a different place. So the reason I bring that is that when you look at it, actually the site is a little bit oasis among all these flooding zones. So, and this is a current flooding zone. So I worry again, in extreme weather events, is the site truly and maybe it's on their that event. I think the same thoughtful approach that you had to the building itself could be used on the landscaping. So is it the topography changes, you ensure that the water moves away from the building, or even when I look at the ground space, it's fully graded. So I'm just thinking like, is there some detailing that can happen? Is the architecture to stop the water? What is the grading system to protect the program that you have created? Because I think that will not only preserve the space we're trying to create, but also there's a true opportunity for the space to become actually a evacuation spot. So when that happens, it can truly do all the purpose that you talked about how we create this space in the community and bringing those to our own. So I thought that's a really great opportunity just because where it's situated, and then to make sure that it's not lost because of where it's located.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe.
Thanks very much for the presentation. It's a very special and unique project. As I was saying in the earlier pre-meeting, there are many reminders to me of my 8-year experience in delivering the Witchwood Barns, and I want to come back to some themes that I think are relevant. At first glance, when I looked at this, I thought, okay, what's a community center doing on this suburban street, and et cetera, et cetera. But as I looked at it more, I think this is an incredible site. What doesn't come across in the presentation very well, but I think I would ask the team to really reflect on this is literally the edge of the city. So it's incredibly special. But notwithstanding the special aspects of the site, the Rouge Park and all of that, access is, I think, a significant challenge, and I want to come back to that as well. My immediate impression of the project is that it is a bit overly focused on a building, a monument in a large site that does not seem well integrated with a landscape. In fact, it doesn't seem to have a landscape idea at the moment. And I think that's a really critical part of how the project has to evolve. There's reference to the inner and the outer. My impression is that it's too bluntly delivered. A more dispersed plan organized around a landscape rather than a landscape organized around a monument that brings the ravine context right to Staines Road. You talked about bringing that ravine context, but the drawings don't show evidence of it. If you look at the renderings, it looks like it could be anywhere in the city to me. So that sense of really bringing the Rouge to Staines Road. And I disagree a bit with Michael in terms of, we've got lots of nature around us. We don't have to worry about nature here too much. I think that this ought to be a building in a park, not a building that's looking at a park, and not a building that you go by to get to a park. And that's not coming across. There's a diagram in the presentation about hardscape, softscape, where there's hardscape against Staines Road and softscape wetland and trying to protect the ravine. I just fundamentally would disagree with that interpretation of the site. It's all a softscape. And now how do you integrate the hardscape elements into it? I appreciate often, and it's been my experience from staff, when dealing with ravine edge sites or edge of the city sites, though that's pretty rare, there's an attempt or a desire to urbanize the street edge. Let's bring that community center up to the inner. And I would just sort of push back really strongly against that instinct here. This is not just any other street in the city. It's the edge of the city with the Rouge Park. And so how do local residents benefit from this project? They benefit potentially beyond the facilities coming here from this incredible landscape and right on their doorstep and the ability to engage with it. So my sense, perhaps contrary to some, is to actually, I'm going to combine this with another observation. The parking to me is completely unbelievable right now. It doesn't work. You can't have a dead end like this. You're going to have an auditorium with over 400 people, plus a gym going on, plus a special event on a holiday. You can easily have 500 to 700 people coming here. And you've got 114 parking spaces, and you've got a limited number on the streets. But, so first thing back to Witchwood, one of the giant challenges there, 5-acre public site, how much of it are we going to dedicate to parking? All the residents wanted to know, wait a minute, you're going to bring all these people in, you can't park on my street. And, after a year or two of discussion and arguing, there's no parking on the site. Now, there we have the benefit of an extensive neighborhood, lots of street parking, great transit. Here, the transit is not great. But, you can augment the special events with shuttles. There can be very creative ways to address access, but and I'm not suggesting you should turn this into a massive parking lot, to be clear. But the other part of the parking, having them in two areas like that, I don't think that works. Having them both as dead ends, I don't think that works. The staff resistance to two driveways, I think, is a big problem. You have to have two driveways on a site that's 120 meters long with limited opportunities for how you organize sites. So I would strongly encourage the staff team to reconsider that. To me, the easy way to deal with this is to, kind of loop from the south end of the site to the north end of the site, create a giant stormwater garden all the way along the frontage that really addresses its context in an effective way and performs that function, and can even be a parking lot. But it's also a loop that you don't have to bring wheel trains way into the site and have people come to a dead end and okay, now what? Everything's backed up. And the people on Warbler Court aren't going to freak out because that's the other obvious solution is a loop. But I can appreciate that's going to be a challenging one. So the other major theme to me, and a couple of people have talked about it, the public spaces seem residual for the most part, or undefined, not shaped by building or landscape. And complete absence of shade consideration is evident, as Jim pointed out earlier. So I think I would suggest some reconsideration of site organization at a pretty fundamental level that helps buildings shape public spaces, and things like a courtyard can actually have cover. I think in, like the last couple of days this summer, this looks to me like a place that people going to desperately want to be outside as much of the year as possible, doing all kinds of things. And I think cover, open, but cover is an essential aspect of it. I loved the consideration, by the way, just want to really applaud everyone on this team thinking about resiliency and community resiliency and how community centers have to become resilient hubs. In climate emergency days, loss of power, it's going to happen more and more. So, major generators on site, doing a little PV is all great, but mostly it's about generation. A giant kitchen, place for people to hang out for a long period of time. I think that's a really important sort of subtext of the program that I really appreciated. Architectural character, this is a really talented team. There's a lot of beautiful aspects to the architecture, but I find at the moment it's most visible. The most visible aspect of the way you view the building the most makes it look very large and monumental and continuous, and it doesn't kind of filter through a landscape. It doesn't have component parts that shape landscape that feel kind of like a welcoming introduction to the Rouge Park, which brings me to just one other topic. It's incredibly brave for this not-for-profit to take this on. It's going to take a lot of money, a lot of fundraising, all of that. You're well on your way, but budget becomes a giant issue in these kinds of situations. Yet it wants to still be a public park. And I'm speculating here that there's no budget for a public park within the municipal budget. Been there before, seen that. And I am just suggesting that city staff and the councillor that's not there yet, but will soon be, consider how a budget for the park can be thought about and rethink of the park, and including its maintenance, its ongoing operation and maintenance, because how do you maintain a place that needs to feel really public while it's also needing to honor the cultural tradition and the local community? And who's taking care of it all? And how do you kind of manage its use? I appreciate that the city has leased the entire thing, I think, at the moment. And I think you said earlier, no preconditions about the landscaping whatsoever. To me, honestly, that's a oversight. I think there needs to be a lot more conversation about how this is managed and shared. The gym and its transparency, that's one of the features of the project for sure. I think one other observation from experience is the auditorium theater for 400 people, and the form in which you've currently got it, which is an auditorium form. And I just would ask the group to reflect on a brand new cultural space for 450 people is a significant event in the city. That's a major new cultural venue. And there are lots of implications in my view that flow from that. And whether an auditorium arrangement is the best way to support long-term cultural production, I would just question. And whether a more flexible kind of space that can really deal with dance, music, and other things over time is something to think about. But I appreciate the thought that in the short term, the gym has got to do everything, and that is hard to pull off. But I think you're sensitive to that. And my final, I think, comment, or two final comments would be, appreciate your patience, Madam Chair, is the soccer field recreational space. As many have said, I think it's an incredibly important part of the social program here. And it feels a little around the corner and tucked over there, like where can it fit? We've got to do this, we've got to do that, where can we put that field? And I just wonder through maybe a reconsideration of the site organization that it couldn't be kind of more like you were describing about the Regent Park situation, something more at the heart of the project in a way. But, I don't appreciate that's not easy. The other thing I would strongly say to the team is, if you're going to propose a phase project, then you have to be drawing the distinct phases and presenting them. Phase 2 may never happen. What's phase 1 look like? And understand all the implications of that. But it's a great project. Wish you well going down the road. Thank you.
So, sorry, did you question this will be being as flexible as possible, the gym or the auditorium?
The auditorium.
Thank you.
No child.
Very great.
Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo the sentiments that have been expressed by my colleagues. I do think the building is, I love the lightness and the whiteness of this building. I think it's very admirable, and you've spent a lot of time on making the building look good and putting in an extremely busy program, as people have said. But I think that has happened at the expense of the exterior programs. And you mentioned that gardening and playgrounds and maybe even a splash pad that are bigger than the Tamil community, but are part of the community that the center will be in. So I think there needs to be a landscape response that looks at those elements and how they are integrated into the site. You mentioned you have a problem with budget. You're going to need $2 to $5 million to start putting some stuff on the landscape. And if you have a budget problem, I'm afraid that the landscape won't be honored or recognized. And as Joe just mentioned, there might be some major rejigging thought around the site. I was thinking that perhaps the building itself could be flipped so that the parking, item number 7 on your site plan, the dead end parking would end up on against the property line of the hydroway. And the hydro right away, I know because I've done projects elsewhere along the same hydro corridor, that the hydro people are amenable to using their space as overflow parking. So you could enter through the hydro corridor, and you could enter, and your parking would be away from the residential in the south. I think the redundant one-way or two-way road at the front of the building could be eliminated in favor of a loop road over by the soccer pitch or the playing field. People want to get their equipment to the playing field, want to get close to that. So the loop could come north and from the north and south, and you would have a lot more space separating the buildings, the residential works on the south side. The item number 3 on your site plan, you call a community plaza. The community plaza is really, I believe, your fire route, because it's close to your enunciator. It's your drop-off area. It's your multifunctional outdoor space. I think you're asking too much of that space to perform. I think it's going to fail. It'll fail either as a fire route that people will park on. It'll fail as drop off because people will be using the space for something else. It'll fail because there will be too many vehicles to program it with an event. I think you need to rethink how the site is approached. The site should also be thought of as a trailhead for Rouge Park and the Meadowway. It is basically the extreme east end of the Meadowway, and it's the introduction of Rouge Park. So your parking lot, and if it was on the hydro lands and it was part of a city program or part of the Meadowway program, I think that people will start parking here to use this site as a trailhead for east-west or going into the Rouge Park. So I think there needs to be some thought about how that works. I'm also thinking that there should be some water connections, surface flow that might lead to the ponds that are on the hydrolands, or as Joe mentioned, a storm facility somewhere on this property. I think there is a number of different things that have to be considered to be reviewed. I'd like to see the building more prominent on the street with you mentioned an LA. I don't think you've created an LA, but you mentioned little sculptural seating areas. I think the seating areas could be built into the 1.5 meter grade change, and they could be enclosed by the building, and the traffic from the street would be behind you and muffled. I'm just trying to see. I also think that you're spending an awful lot of your precious money on an indoor basketball court. Now, that's what the graphic shows. I think it'll be more of an indoor programmable space, but an outdoor basketball court might save you some money and might save you some square footage. I'm not sure how that could work, but that's an awful lot of money for an indoor basketball court. I think that there needs to be more integration with planting, landscape, and how the building reacts to the landscape. So I'm saying that this should go back to the drawing boards to be rethought of in more of an environmental and holistic way of how the site is developed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Sabella.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I found it very comprehensive, and I really liked the beginning of it. It just spoke about the history and of the Tamil culture and how important this was. This is an incredible site, and I'm really pleased that this is going to be community use for this site. The views towards the Rouge are spectacular, and I do hope that as the architecture gets developed, that those views will be maximized from the building from both levels. I like the architecture. I find it very simple, and I like the white color, and I find it intriguing. But I do feel that architecture has gone too far ahead of the rest of the considerations that are required to make this a truly successful community space. And I feel that the residual spaces in between, there's a lot of awkwardness about some of those spaces and accessing them. For instance, the sculpture garden, which was considered to be part of the center of this building, has no doors going out to it other than an exit from upstairs. And it's a sculpture garden, so it should allow for people to freely move through it. So there's a lot of good intentions, but I don't see it executed in the architecture. There's quite a few contrasting between the renderings and the plans in terms of where there are windows and views. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to make that all very appropriate for this setting. But above all, I think what's really lacking is an overall master plan that balances the exterior uses and the potential for future exterior uses with how the building functions and how the building and those exterior uses could work together and support each other. And I think that is definitely missing on this site. And I think in doing so, I think a lot of these awkward gestures or spaces, all that could be worked out. be it grading changes, like I feel the straight on entrance with a ramp could easily be, the exit coming out of the building is a strong linear line, and yet as it approaches the street, it's directly opposite a private residence. So perhaps diagonal approaches through that front sloping space could address all the grade challenges that are there. I find it awkward the way the parking is straddling on both ends of the site, and I think Jim had some good suggestions for that. So there's a lot of little things that I don't feel are really appropriate to comment on right now, but I do really, really encourage to go back and start with a fresh slate and look at all the potential for the outside and the inside and how they could work in a harmony together. I think that's really lacking on this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Sibel. And Michael, you have one.
There's something I wanted to mention in my first comments very briefly. Page 97, which is the courtyard diagram. Fulfilling the courtyard diagram would be a powerful indicator of success of the diagram if some reference to the exterior material and architecture was somehow brought into the interior, so that you knew that that was a fundamental aspect of the planning. So I think the courtyard, it's not that easy to read, I would say, in the plans until you explore the 3D of it, but consider that, please.
Thank you. It's now my job to sum up the points that have been made by the panel in this discussion, after which we will have a vote. And what we try to do as in chairing this meeting is to try to sit down and fortify key points of consensus and discussion. So that's what you'll hear from me today. I wanted to start off by thanking the proponent and for bringing this project to the panel. On behalf of the panel, I want to commend you for the sophistication of the proposal, the architecture, and of the kind of ambition of it as well. It's really wonderful for us to be able to see these projects that have such strong community and cultural ambition, and to have hired, the eminent firm to do that is also really exciting to see that for the city. So I think it's important to frame the comments of the panel within that, which is all by way of saying it's a very exciting and ambitious proposal that is at a very beginning stage. And so some of the comments are really reflecting more where it could go rather than necessarily, although we're talking about some of the things that are missing that I see are deficient, it's really about where it could go. So the large number of the comments were around landscape and planning, so I'm going to start with those. The project, the members felt over-focused on the building without enough of a landscape strategy or a public grounds or like a public space strategy. The public spaces, it was felt, were not defined either particularly well yet by the architecture or the landscape, and this is an area for development. Panel suggests that you consider incorporating more shade and planting on the plaza to mitigate heat and extreme weather conditions and truly blend the site with the Rouge. To think of the site as a trailhead for the park. Panel members questioned the functionality and built comfort of the large drop-off area in combination with the site parking. It was suggested that a master plan that balances uses and future uses is needed. And the overarching thought that this should be a building in a park. We are at the edge of the city on a stunning wilderness, and the development of the landscape and the public space around the building should really reflect that in future, through the future development of the project. Panel suggests that you consider reducing the amount of parking on the site, which would then also go back to that the issue with heat island and runoff. That would help mitigate that. Also reduce and study more deeply the drop-off area and whether all of that is required. This is in light of the ability to park on Staines Avenue, sorry, I got that wrong. So the panel suggests you rethink the parking planning and location thereof, including the dead ends and splitting the parking into 2 locations. Panel member suggested strongly suggested that 2 driveways are needed, and that it be worth looking at whether it's possible to come in through the hydro corridor. I would say generally, among panel members, there was some struggle with the site and the building party, including so it's building on the previous comment, where exterior amenities and functions are located relative to the interior spaces. Following out of this, the location of the playground was questioned. Panel asked you to consider putting it on the south side where it might get more sun and be more accessible to a greater number of areas. On materiality and architecture, I mean, this is really putting some of the comments that I've already captured in a different way. Just to perhaps serve as an underline, the monumentality of the building currently doesn't ease itself into the surrounding natural context. I think that that's perhaps less a comment about the architecture than it is necessarily about the landscape, which we've already discussed. And then at a more granular level, a question of whether the auditorium was the most flexible typology for all the activities and events that want to happen within the building. On sustainability, you're urged to define priorities as you move forward and consider simplification of the design in order to optimize energy and thermal efficiency and performance. That's on materiality and architecture. Fourth, this is a much shorter one. A panel member brought up that it's very important to have a strategy and budget for the creation, maintenance, and management of the public exterior spaces and landscape. This is a must as you move forward. Otherwise, that will falter and potentially fail as a space. And finally, the 5th point on the package. Panel member suggested it'd be really important to represent the river and surrounding natural features more fulsomely. This will help support the open plaza, which at first blush looks more too urban, and this ties into the landscape comments as well. I forgot one under planning and landscape. Panel's keen to have an understanding of stormwater management strategies and flood protection in extreme weather events. I can ensure the proponents encouraged to ensure that the site and building are protected for these kinds of events, and beyond that can perform as a place of refuge for the community. That's it as a summary of the comments. There'll be a full meeting minutes will be published for your use and for moving forward. Again, we'd like to thank you so much for bringing this. It was a lovely to be able to see and to enjoy the ambitions and the plans by the community to create this space for both the town community and greater communities. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Maria. We are going to move into a vote. Great person. I'm sure. Do you just want to read it? No, just read it. Yeah, just read it on.
We don't need the visual.
There's. All right. Vote is intended to provide emphasis and clarity to the discussion and an indication of how well the project advances panel's mandated promoting design excellence. The voting options are as follows. Support means that the project meets the relevant design excellence objectives. The panel advises that the project should continue in the proposed direction and include refinements that were recommended during the review. This option can be made with key conditions if so desired. Non-support means the project does not meet the fundamental design excellence objectives, and the panel advises the project should be substantially redesigned to address the issues identified during the discussion. Before we move to the vote, do I have any panel members who would like to propose an option, key conditions for a vote of support? Jim and Sabella, I can't see you, so if you're raising your hand to propose a condition, can you say it? Can you say something verbally, please?
I have no conditions to add.
Okay, and Jim?
Same here. No condition.
Okay, so we'll move into a vote, and as I call your name, if you could please let us know how you vote. Okay, Michael,
Support.
Judy. Support. Olivia. Support. Jessica. Support. Ralph. Support. Jim Goff.
Non-support.
Jim Melvin.
Non-support.
Joe Bobco.
Non-support.
Sabella.
Non-support.
So recorded. We have 5 votes of support and 4 of non-support. Right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. That concludes the session today. As noted before, you will get a copy of the meeting minutes, and as soon as we're getting very quick at it, but thank you again for attending and presenting, and thanks to the panel and city for that concludes today's DR. Yes.
What do you do?
I got
No, wonderful.
it.